Good day everyone, this is Senjin Sierra and welcome to Chapter 8. We are going to discuss with you the designing and evaluating of portfolio. I am going to give you the overview, learning objectives, and a short introduction to what we are going to discuss in this chapter. But before anything else, I would like to give you a recap of what Chapter 7 has discussed, which is the nature of portfolio assessment. So we all know, or we have knew, that portfolio assessment is an evaluation tool used to document students' learning through a series of students-developed artifacts. Second, it is a process that can serve a variety of purposes. Third, we all know that portfolio is a collection of students' work that can exhibit a student's effort. To emphasize this showcase that an assessment portfolio contains products that can be used to assess the owner's competence. Now, let us proceed to the learning objectives and overview of this chapter. So, for the overview of this chapter, portfolio development requires learners to collect and integrate examples of their work and allows the teacher to assess their learners as well. This assessment tool provides opportunities for both learners and teachers to better understand the educational process in a wider perspective. So this chapter describes the process of planning and implementing portfolio assessments in the classroom. The steps are aligned with the teaching and learning assessment to the curriculum, the teaching and the learning activities as well. And now for the learning objective of this chapter, intended learning outcome. At the end of the chapter, we should be able to develop and evaluate portfolio assessment utilized in the classroom. To begin with Chapter 8, according to Paulson and Mayer, portfolios offer a way of assessing student learning that is way different from traditional methods. So this designing of portfolio and evaluating of the portfolio provides the teacher and students opportunity to observe students in a broader way or in a broader context, taking risk, developing creative solution, and learning to make judgments about their own performances. So this chapter will not only tackle about the designs and evaluation, but this chapter will discuss about how is it important to evaluate the portfolios, how does designing aligns with the performance of the students. So now I will give the floor to the next reporter.
Good day everyone, I am Chanika Kim Astrofuli from Grade 7. Now, I will be going to continue our topic from Chapter 8, the designing and evaluating portfolio assessment in the classroom. Now, I will be going to discuss the first steps for developing portfolio assessment, second, identify overall purpose and focus, and lastly, identify the physical structure in the classroom. Designing a portfolio assessment requires some advanced and careful planning. So here are the following steps provide a general directions for developing portfolio assessment. First is to determine the purpose of the portfolio. It decides how the results of a portfolio evaluation will be used to inform the program. Second is to identify the learning outcomes the portfolio will address. So when planning to implement a portfolio requirement, the program may need to modify activities or the outcome in courses or the program or the institution. Third is to decide what students will include in their portfolio. So portfolios can contain a range of items, plans, reports, essays, checklists, self-assessments, reference, audio, and video clips. So in Showcase a portfolio, students include work completed near the end of the program. In a development portfolio, students include work completed early and late in the program so that development can't be judged. Fourth is to identify or develop the scoring criteria, or should I say the rubric. It is to judge the quality of the portfolio, to include the scoring rubric with instructions given to the students. So fifth is to establish standards of performance and examples of a high, medium, and low scoring portfolio. And lastly, for the sixth, it is to create student instructions that specify how students collect, select, reflect, format, and submit. It emphasizes to students the purpose of portfolio, and that is their responsibility to select items that clearly demonstrate mastery of their learning outcomes. And also to emphasize to faculty that is their responsibility to help students by explicitly trying course assessments to portfolio requirements. So for developing the portfolio, it always reminds to collect, select, reflect, format, and to submit. For the collect, it tells students where in the curriculum or co-curricular activities they will produce evidence related to the outcomes being assessed. For select, it asks students to select the evidence, instructs students to label each piece of evidence according to the learning outcome being demonstrated. So for the reflect, it gives students directions on how to write 1 or 2 page reflective essay that explains why they selected the particular examples, how the pieces demonstrate their achievement to the program outcomes, and also how their knowledge, ability, attitude change. So for the format, it tells students to format requirements like type of binder, font, and style guide requirements, and online submission requirements. And lastly, for the submit, it gives submission and dates and instructions. So now let's proceed to the identify overall purpose and focus. The design and use of portfolio begins with a clear description of your purpose and focus. Is it why do I want a portfolio and what learning targets and curriculum goals will it serve? It also to sharpen the focus of identifying the purpose and focus of portfolio. So this you can clearly identify why you want your students to create a portfolio. So these are the list of questions on how to prepare and use portfolio. First is who will construct the portfolio? Of course, the individual students with teacher input and help. Individual students with input and help, cooperative learning groups, and lastly, cooperative-based groups or whole group work and individual member work with teacher input and help. Second is what type of portfolio do you want to use? Third is what are the purposes and objectives of portfolio? And fourth is what categories of work examples should go into the portfolio? And for the fifth, what criteria are students or group use to select their interests? And lastly, who will develop the rubrics to assess and evaluate the portfolios? So the faculty and the students. So is it important to distinguish between learning targets for individual work samples and the content of portfolios as a whole? Because the target that reflect all content tends to be a broader and more general, such as development as a reader, adapts writing to audience, speaks clearly, and adapts writing style to different purposes. The present K-12 curriculum provides learning targets, which need to be achieved in form of content and perform standards. Thus, the nature of using portfolio assessment is based from importance and focus of the learning targets. It necessitates that portfolio matches with learning standards and goals. Here is an example of assessing reading skills performance which shows the alignment of teaching and learning goal, activities and assessment tasks which includes portfolio evidence. First goal is to decode basic reading skills for beginning or weak readers. So sample classroom activity is read simple text. And for the portfolio evidence, word bank list, words mastered. Selected text I can read, completed reading tasks, and reading on cassette. And for the assessment tools, individual progress report, peer complement, self-peer assessment, and rating skills. Second goal is understand simple text, narrative or is it expository types. So for the sample classroom activity, read familiar story. Practice scanning ads, TV guide, identify the main points and details in a news report. And for the portfolio evidence, cassette of story read, reading strategies, checklist, completed reading tasks, and corrected test item. So for the assessment tools, self-per assessment, checklist, rating skills, and for the answer key. Third goal is to appreciate literature or stories, poems read in class. Example, understanding the character and theme. And for the sample classroom activity, semi-extensive reading activities like both guided and independent reading. So for the portfolio evidence, reading logs, reading journal, books, tasks, cassette, video clips, and artworks. And for the assessment tools, self-per assessment checklist. For the fourth is reading for pleasure, extensive reading. So the sample class activity is sustained silent reading in class as well as at home. For the performance evidence, a log of books, booklets, reading cards, new articles read like creative tasks and comment cards. For the assessment tools, teachers record of students reading, rating skill, relating content, presentation, and language. And for the last goal is to use a simple information tools resource materials. For the sample classroom activity, work with glossary, table of contents, dictionary, and search engines encyclopedias. So for the portfolio evidence, dictionary exercises, alphabetizing, matching definitions to words, synonyms, antonyms, and etc. Results for search part of project or plus comment card. And for the assessment tools, give an answer key or give appropriate information found, partially found, and not found. Now let's proceed to identify the physical structure. So once the purpose and targets have been clarified, we need to think of the physical structure of the portfolio. So here are some practical questions affect the successful use of portfolio in your classroom. So the first question is what it will look like. Second is where will the students place the outputs. Third is what type of container is appropriate. Fourth question is do they need file folders, clear book, and plastic bins? And another question is how are the materials to be organized? Is it categorically, numerically, alphabetically, by subject area, or in other ways? And last question is where can students store the portfolios for easy access? So now, if students cannot manage and access their materials effectively, they will become discouraged. You may need your original attentions based on the answer to practical considerations. Choices of products and work outputs influence students on what to include in their portfolio. So that's all for my report. Thank you and God bless. Once again, I am Jenica Kim S. Rufuli from Group 7.
Good day everyone, I am Rhea Mesa Sada. I'm going to continue the discussion with my assigned topic, identify and evaluate scoring criteria and communicate the results portfolio. Before anything else, I would like to give you the importance of scoring criteria. It is essential because it helps students to understand what qualities their work should have. This point is frequently expressed in terms of students comprehending the learning objective and the performance targets. So after determining the student reflection guidelines, the next step is to establish the scoring criteria you will use in evaluating student performances. As future educator, we should enable to assess students' work openly and fairly. That will help us provide valuable feedback to students and easily justify how marks have been awarded. By working on the students' criteria, learners will develop greater ownership of the process and will have experience in working cooperatively and collaboratively. However, as the facilitator of learning, you are responsible to ensure the reliability and high quality of scoring criteria. The students should be informed also on how you will evaluate their portfolios. This can be done by sharing the scoring criteria with your students so that they can ask questions, give their suggestions, and insights. The table below shows sample of math portfolio under the content of problem solving. So we have here the table, math problem solving portfolio rating form. Then the content categories of this portfolio are the following: problem solving, numbers and operations, estimation, predictions, problem 1, problem 2, and final problem. And here is the form to be completed by the student. Next, a form to be completed by the teacher. So we have the Roman numeral number 1, quality of reflection, and the rating of it and its following description. The second Roman numeral is the mathematical knowledge of this portfolio. So we have also the rating, and the description is the strategic knowledge. We have the rating also from 5 to 1 and the description. Fourth Roman numerical is the communication. We have the rating 5 to 1 and the description. We have the sum of ratings under the form to be completed by the teacher and average of ratings, also the comment or the feedback of the teacher. Previously, I discussed and gave example of a portfolio, and it is a math portfolio. And I gave also example criteria to be completed by teachers and students. We already know that criteria provide students with information about the qualities, characteristics, and aspects of an assessment task that will be used to measure their attainment of each of the learning outcomes. Criteria make it clear to students that factors will be taken into account when making judgments about their performance. It could be argued that the most direct way students experience what is needed to achieve the unit's learning outcomes is through the assessment criteria. Therefore, the number of criteria for a single task, like the portfolio, needs to be suitably small in order to enable students to clearly understand what is expected of them. Criteria define the characteristics of the work or performance, but they do not define how well students must demonstrate those characteristics. Now it is clear for us. Let me give some conclusion of the first topic in evaluating scoring criteria. For me, the rubrics or the criteria of the portfolio must be available and be consistent with the purpose of the portfolio and with the overall curriculum framework. Reliability must be considered as well to give the same results for the same students when applied by different teachers. Now, let's proceed for the communicate the results of portfolio evaluation. So, this is the second topic of my discussion. The final step in implementing portfolio assessment is to conduct a conference with each student to review its contents and students' reflections and assessments of the individual output. Key to remember, first is to give your students guidelines for these conferences so that they can prepare some questions ahead of time and allow the students to give their views and insights during conference. As a result, this serves as an avenue to determine the strengths and limitation of portfolio for plan of action formulation. We teachers, we must put in our minds some concepts to fill with in order to make explicit and most important behaviors that they can follow and enact. Let's go on for my observation. It is critical to establish the criteria for evaluating the portfolio because an assessment criterion enables students to recognize and select work of high quality. It also allows and encourages discussion among teachers, students, and others about the outcomes and their quality. So the students acquire learning and determine themselves where the rating they belong.
Hi, my name is Joy Cañador Servida and I will be your reporter for today's video. Did you remember way back then when our teachers asked us to make a portfolio? Well, our topic is all about that. Let's proceed then. Here is the following checklist for implementing portfolios. Are students knowledgeable about what a portfolio is and how it will be used? Do students know why portfolios are important? Are the students responsible for or involved in selecting the content? Is there a sufficient number of work samples and not too many? Is a table of contents included? Are specific self-evaluation questions provided? Is the checklist of contents complete? Are scoring criteria for individualized teacher-written comments provided? And are student-teacher conference provided? Those are to be considered when implementing portfolios. One advantage of portfolio assessment is allowing the students to revisit, reflect, and evaluate their own work. This allows them to practice critiquing and conceptualizing the quality of their work based on the criteria performance. This also provides an opportunity for students to become better achievers as they learn to reflect on their strengths and weaknesses. Teacher as a model should be the first person to demonstrate the skills in evaluating and critiquing portfolios. Once the students understand the process and the principle of evaluating, they can start to engage with their own reflection and establish a comfortable, confident, and reliable analysis and critique of their own work. Some questions can be asked to facilitate students' self-reflection for individual works which give insights into how students have been reaching the learning targets. These are the following. Why did you select the piece of writing? What did you learn from the selection? Can you identify your strengths and weaknesses? What problems have you encountered in doing the task? Which is the most satisfying experience? What are your insights after reading the poem? Is this your best work? What kind of work would you like to do in the future? And that is the end of my discussion. Thank you so much for listening about portfolio evaluation and student evaluation. God bless us all and have a great day.
Good afternoon everyone, I'm Kylie Sawala, the next reporter from this group. For the continuation of our report in Chapter 8, I will discuss the remaining subtopics under this chapter. 2.2 Teacher Evaluation and 2.3 Student-Teacher Conference. To formally start, let us know what is meant by teacher evaluation. So when we say teacher evaluation, it is defined as a systematic procedure of reviewing the performances of the teachers in a classroom and analyzing the review to provide constructive feedback for the teacher's professional growth. Details of a teacher evaluation survey may vary from district as they governed by state laws. Principals and administrative staff members are traditionally involved in evaluating the teacher. Evaluating a portfolio involves making a judgment about students' output. The teacher can use numerical scores to summarize judgment or qualitative system. Scoring needs to be reliable, should not be affected by inconsistencies not related to the qualities being judged. Aspects such as students' performance in terms of classworks, records maintained by the teachers, daily or weekly lessons plan, etc. Considered while evaluating a teacher, it is one of the most vital elements for a thorough career development of a teacher and maintain the quality of a good education. As a rule of thumb, it is important to remember that the purpose of portfolio is to assess students' outcome of instructional goals. The sample of entries are indicators whether students have achieved the goal of instruction, which are evaluated based on portfolio's entire content, structure, and individual entries. New and advanced teacher evaluation methods are being developed to enhance a teacher endeavors and efficacy. For example, attrition rate of education staff is one of the highest in the world. It has become a major concern since the deficit of trained educational staff keeps increasing every year. In most of the classroom situation, the teacher is both the observer and the rater. If there are some important instructional decisions to be made, additional rater must be considered in order to scoring more fair. Teacher can be evaluated using online quantitative and qualitative mediums such as survey, polls, focus groups, and etc. Some of the best examples of teacher evaluation are various components of proper planning can be evaluated. For example, use of assessment information for planning. Proper planning, all teachers will be evaluated on the effectiveness of the use of the assessment of information. So what is the purpose of teacher evaluation? The purpose of teacher evaluation is to seek to improve the teacher's own practice by identifying strengths and weaknesses. For further professional development, the improvement function. Second is to aim at ensuring the teacher professional or it perform at their best to ensure or to enhance student learning, the accountability function. Having experience in the highly qualified teacher is important for educational outcomes. Teacher qualifies has a significant effects on educational outcomes, even when considering other factors such as poverty, class size, family situation, and funding issues. Teacher evaluation has become a way to ensure that educators are meeting state or district standards of education and student attainment. The next subtopics under Chapter 8 is the 2.3, the Student-Teacher Conference. So when we say Student-Teacher Conference are a great way to connect and understand students better. These meetings provides a platform to work with the students and reflect on their interests, performances, and projects. Student-Teacher Conference empowers students to identify plans and set their own learning goals. Typically, these conferences are short and when conducted on a regular basis have numerous benefits. The greatest being that it stimulates higher academic performances and students' accountability. As mentioned in the steps, in developing portfolio assessment, the final steps to conduct a conference with each student to review the content, reflections, and evaluation. It should be scheduled throughout the year, which provides important link between the students and teachers. Your students can be responsible for conducting the conference, and this will serve as a motivating force for the learners to produce excellent portfolio in the future. Student-Teacher Conference when necessary. Conference can be held with the teacher or students and the parents and or guardian of the student. Student-Teacher Conference should be used when a private conversation with the students is necessary. They can be used as a deterrent techniques during a class after. After noticing a decline in students' academic performances, or according to Macmillan 2007, pointed out that students need to compare their reflections with your evaluations and make plans for subsequent work, although weaknesses and areas for improvement need to be covered. Emphasize students' progress and achievement as well. Documentation of the conferences will help measure students' progress after a particular duration of time. Documentation also provides information when a particular problem re-emerges, or if a new strategies need to be tried. It helps with research. serves as evidence for supporting the use of student-teacher conferences and can be used to showcase the student progress in parent-teacher meeting. One way or another, this also provides an excellent means of communicating with parents. The work outputs and reflections of the student can be a sort of windows into what is happening within the classroom, as parents see the different aspects of their children's experiences in the school. As a tripartite communication between the parents, teachers, and student portfolio assessment provides framework for meaningful three-way discussion of the progress, achievement, and limitations. While there may be multiple problems or concerns to address, it is the best to address only one or two problems in a session so students can focus on improving these areas. It is always helpful to have an end results in mind for the conference. For example, if the teacher is addressing a problem, be sure to help the students find solution or provide solution that they can try later on their own. Ending the conferencing with no clear discussion or instruction will leave the student lacking any clear path to better success. After the portfolios are complete, it is a good idea to have an exhibition of portfolios and or student-led parent-teacher conferences in which students present their portfolios to their parents. The significance of student-teacher conference is that students-teacher conference can be used as an opportunity for teacher to understand the functions of his student behavior and for students to reflect on the impacts of their behaviors and their learning of others. A student-teacher conference is one-on-one meeting between a student and teacher. The most effective conference ensure that each member is both an expert and learner during the conversation. Both students and teacher identify strengths and areas of growth during their discussion and then collaboratively select specific strategies that will support the students' progress. And that would be all for my report in this afternoon. Thank you.